Good evening, Rowan. It's the 9th of July 2016 and it's just after midnight. And obviously I'm making you my usual before the weekend video to reassure you I won't be seducing any priests over the weekend, so you can relax. Obviously I'll be seeing my beloved, but I'll say a bit more about that later on because I've seen him during the week and he's just so wonderful. But I'll tell you a bit more about that later on. Anyway, oh yes, I want to wish you a happy anniversary as well, because it's actually a year today that I was thrown out of my house, the 9th of July 2015. So I just want you to reflect over that carefully and consider whether it got the outcome that you wanted. Do you think you're going to be able to manipulate me or not? Has it worked so far? You see, sane people can evaluate things like this and learn from things like this, whereas you obviously can't. And during the course of that year as well, I've still been harassed to death continually and tortured, having weapons fired at me, fired at private parts of my body, which obviously was your idea because you're a disgusting pervert. So all of that's going to come out, isn't it, what you said to do and the reasons why. When actually the reasons why are because you want to degrade me because I make you feel inadequate. That's because you are inadequate. Most people make you feel inadequate, actually, but I make you feel more inadequate than most people do. And that's because, I can see straight through you, and I'm far more competent than you are, and that I didn't have a good opinion of you when I was in Wales. Otherwise, I'd have stayed there and fawned all over you like your brainless devotees do. So this is why you're having remote weapons fired at me, and also because you can't get your hands on me, so it's the next best thing, and you've got to live out your sexual fantasies as much as you can. And also, you know how torturing it is as well. So this is another reason why you do it, to try and wear me down, to break me down, so I'll agree to everything to stop the constant harassment, torture and abuse. And this has been the whole intention of this campaign against me for the last 7.5 years. It's never been intended to help me. The real reason behind it all was to break me down, either force me to capitulate or drive me mad in order to discredit me and exonerate you. And that's what those psychiatrists were up to as well, because they're middle class professionals, upper middle class professionals, and they identified with you, and they regarded me as a kind of dangerous lunatic, really, and they wanted to shut me up and control me and discredit me. Because I made them feel uncomfortable. So anyway, I thought we could continue with our talks this evening about these weird talks that you gave about the desert fathers last summer, just after I've been thrown out of my house. And I'm talking this evening about a video called Self-Discovery. Without further ado, I'll move on to talking about the things that you've said. Oh, I haven't edited these clips that I'm showing, by the way. Someone else had edited them before they were uploaded onto YouTube. So, you say, in the life of the desert is the discovery of who you actually are. The burden that lays on you can be quite considerable, because to discover before God who you really are is less cosy than it might sound. Well, it would certainly be less cosy for you, wouldn't it? Because you would have to face the fact that you're a disgusting pervert and a psychopathic scumbag, and that you were among the most evil people on the earth, whereas you actually want to believe that you're superior to other people. And this is why you try to drag other people down, because you've got no interest in facing yourself and your own weaknesses and faults. and working to improve yourself. You're not interested in improving yourself. So the only way that you can feel superior to other people is to try and drag them down, to wallow in the same cesspit that you're wallowing in, so you can try and drown them in there as well. So that's your intention, in trying to drag other people down, to your own sordid level, because you're too lazy and wicked to try and improve yourself. And you've got this extreme narcissism which makes you want to be superior to everybody. You think you're superior to everybody, but rather than actually working to go in that direction, you've got to destroy anything in other people that makes you feel inadequate, which is an awful lot of things because you are inadequate. So you go on to say, if only everyone else would go away, if only everyone else would stop telling me what to do, then I'd be so marvellous. Then myself would flower wonderfully in all its creativity and complexity and beauty. Well, I want everyone else to go away. I think you're having a snipe at me because I'm not having anything to do with anybody, and I haven't been for quite a long time now. So you're shooting in the dark again, aren't you? Um, Implying that I'm thinking, well, if other people went away, I'd be so marvellous. Well, I don't have any need to be marvellous, Rowan. I don't care about being marvellous. It's completely irrelevant to me. What I don't want is being harassed and tortured to death by people I don't even know, who don't know me, who don't even regard me as a human being. That's why they can torture me and laugh at me suffering when they do these things to me. And while, because people who know me, who've been friends with me, actually felt guilty about treating me in a bad way, whereas people who don't know me don't even give a shit. It makes them feel good to think that they're helping me. And so they harass and torture me everywhere, and they think it's funny if I get upset or angry about that, because it's quite easy for them to feel that way, because it doesn't cost them a single thing to do what they're doing. They get to feel good about themselves, like they're doing something helpful. And actually, what I want and the way I feel is the most irrelevant thing in the whole of this campaign of harassment and abuse that's lasted 7.5 years and nearly led to my death. And I'm the most irrelevant person in it because they just bulldoze on no matter what. It just doesn't matter. They're quite prepared to kill me to bulldoze on with this bullshit agenda. So I do wish everyone else would go away and stop pushing me around. But that's not because I'd feel so marvellous. I'd just feel like myself again instead of being pushed and shoved backwards and forwards by interfering busybodies who I don't want anything to do with. So, well, also, this is giving something away about you, isn't it? That you want to feel so marvellous, which is quite obvious by the way that you carry on anyway and the things that you say. So then you go on to say, yes, say the Desert Fathers, but the trouble is, if everyone else were taken away, you wouldn't have a clue who you are. And finding out who you were in the eyes of God would actually be a long and painful job. Well, I've got no reason to believe that the Desert Fathers even said this at all, because you lie about absolutely everything, as I've demonstrated many times. And this quite simply isn't true, that if everyone else were taken away, you wouldn't have a clue who you are. It just isn't true. You know, as I've said before, the personality is formed by the age of 25. I certainly don't need other people telling me who I am. In fact, whenever they try to do things like that, they're wrong all the time. They make up packs of lies about me. They act on their own assumptions, what motivates them, how they feel about certain things, what their priorities are, and they make up this fantasy in their head You're the most extreme example of that, but an awful lot of people have done that to me over the last few years, and even before that because of you. And they've got this fantasy in their head, and you can't say anything to contradict them. I can't say anything to contradict you because you've decided who I am and you're determined to force me to be someone other than who I am. I do not need you to define me, and particularly not when your only interest is ruining me and saving your own skin. So it's complete crap that you wouldn't know who you were if other people went away. I know perfectly well who I am, and I wish other people had stopped sticking their nose in my business. All the problems of my adult life have been caused to me by the interference of other people, and they wouldn't have occurred if they would just mind their own business. And that's nearly led to my death, with psychiatrists sticking their noses in my business. So I'm even more hostile to it than I was before. So if you think I need a crap merchant, satanic filth, sexual predator like you to tell me who I am, you're completely insane. Anyway, so you go on to say, again and again in the literature of the desert, you come across that fundamental principle, self-criticism, which says to you, I haven't yet found who I am. I can't express myself because I don't know who I am yet. I don't even believe that the Desert Fathers said this at all. This is your kind of bullshit head messing, mind control, narcissistic crap. I don't believe the Desert Fathers said that. If they were saying crap like this, nobody would be interested in them. Their works would have been lost thousands of years ago, basically, over 1,000 years ago. No one would have bothered preserving their works if they talked this much crap. I think you're making it up. I can't express myself because I don't know who I am yet, and what I want to express and what feels like honesty and rampant integrity and deep creativity is actually very, very likely to be just another manifestation of all those rather trivial, rather self-seeking motivations which I'd like to think I've left behind. Well, you've got self-seeking, trivial, motivations, and you'll never leave them behind because you're absolutely dedicated to them. You're dedicated to promoting your own interests at any cost, and I really mean at any cost, which I've demonstrated. You're quite prepared to have the majority of the population of the earth killed off just to promote your own agenda. Of course, you didn't know how much I knew about all these things then, did you? So, and also I hadn't started making these videos, so you thought you could get away with talking this crap, and probably thought you were still going to mind control me into giving you what you want. That's because you're completely insane. And I did say that I was absolutely sick of you controlling the narrative, and the reason that I started making these videos was because I decided to take control of the narrative. And that's not only from you, it's also from these psychological people as well. It's not just psychiatrists, but an awful lot of people have thought that they could interpret me, that they've got the right, they've all got some bullshit theory that they read in a globalist sponsored book at some time in the past, and they know, you see, why I have certain experiences. They know why I become distressed. And they make up stories about it which are just so ridiculous and so easy to prove wrong. They make up stories to validate themselves and their own worldview and to make themselves feel comfortable, and they don't want some riffraff like me coming along and disturbing their cosy worldview and maybe giving them the impression that they're not superior to everybody else. like they thought they were, and that actually they don't have the right to control everybody else either. So you're like that, and these people who tried to murder me and invented a smear campaign about me, they're rather like that as well. So these are the reasons why I decided to take control of the narrative, because normally I don't really feel the need to explain myself or explain anything. Um, but I just got sick to death. I've been listening to you and all the shit you talk for decades, and then I found out you'd done all these things to me, and then I did some research into you and found out what was behind it all, and I decided to take control of the narrative because I'm sick of your narcissistic, cultish teachings and all the crap that you talk, and all your globalist propaganda, which is so easy to see through. So that's why I started making these videos, to take control of the narrative, because I was sick of you thinking that you were in control. But I hadn't started doing it when you made these videos, so you didn't know I was going to do that. And you would have probably thought of some more subtle shit to talk if you'd have known I was going to answer you back. So you go on to say, very briefly, it's letting go of self-justification, that particular kind of creating one's own image and selfhood that will justify oneself, that will enable oneself to say, I've made it now, I can relax. Well, I've never said that. I've never wanted to say that. And my own self-image and selfhood is related to reality. I know what my values are, and I know how hard I've tried to live them out despite scumbags like you and harassing hordes of everybody, terrorising me all the time. So, you know, I know what my values are, I know what my beliefs are, I know that I'm right, actually, I know that I'm right. So, no snivelling little mummy's boy like you is going to manipulate me to move from that. And as I've said in relation to many other things, you can call that what you like. I don't give a shit. I'm not moving one iota for a scumbag like you. So you then say, only the mystery of God is going to tell me who I am. And facing that mystery in its fullness is going to require of me an enormous dispossession of the things that look as if they're going to tell me who I am. Well, this is just complete mumbo jumbo. You're just making this up. How can you be talking about the Desert Fathers and talking this crap? You're just making it up. It's like your creation narrative and all the crap you talked about Teresa of Avila. You're misquoting the Bible, misquoting Jesus, misrepresenting the gospel, saying the book of Leviticus says the opposite of what he says, misquoting poems by other people and saying it's the book of Proverbs, and misrepresenting St. Paul, and saying that the book of Revelation was page after page of paranoid fantasy and malice, which is written in one of your books. So the only person who is self-serving and self-seeking to the kind of degree that you're talking about is you. So if you weren't a spiritual vampire and you actually had a reflection in the mirror that you could actually see yourself at all, then that's what you'd see if you looked in the mirror. These are your characteristics that you're talking about. You don't know who you are because you aren't anybody. You've got no personality. All you are a series of masks that you put on to try and manipulate other people. So you go on to talk about one of the Desert Fathers now. I'm just going to mention something about St. John of the Cross. He was actually a very short man. He was only 4'11" tall. And you know, obviously, I've got a great devotion to St. John of the Cross and I've written a thesis about him. So this is what you say next, and you're talking about the Desert Fathers here, not St. John of the Cross, but this is what you say. John the Dwarf, Abba John, said, "We have put the light burden on one side, that is to say, self-accusation, and we have loaded ourselves with the heavy burden, self-justification." So what I think you're doing here, by talking about John the Dwarf, you knew I'd think of St. John of the Cross straight away, even though you're talking about a different person. So you think if you tell me that St. John of the Cross says something, then I'm going to believe what you say, and I'm going to do what you want. The same as when you quote the Pope as well. You think I'm going to be swayed by these things, even though I know you're talking total crap. So you go on to say, self-justification is something, in fact, inimical to the truth self. Self-accusation, that is self-questioning, self-criticism, is the lighter burden, strange as it may sound. Self-expression, self-discovery, self-realisation. Right, well, you need to start self-criticism and self-accusation, don't you? And stop gaslighting everybody else. This is gaslighting. And saying John the Dwarf at the beginning of it isn't giving it any more authority, when I know that you're talking total shit. And I know that you're gaslighting and that you'll accuse anybody except you. And this is just after you'd made the video about Dostoevsky, when you were saying I had to take responsibility for something I haven't done, because that's my offering in an unjust world. So, self-expression, self-discovery, self-realisation. Well, I'm not looking for any of those things. And this isn't a Christian path, self-expression, self-discovery and self-realisation. The traditional Christian path is self-denial. I mean, Christ said to deny yourself, take up your cross and follow him. So you may think, because you just live in your own fantasy world and you make up whatever crap that you want, like me being a lesbian and a prostitute and all the other things I can't even be bothered to go through now. Since we have no idea at the beginning what that self is, this becomes a journey into the dark, a journey of labour, pain and patience. So a journey into the dark is a reference to St. John of the Cross's Dark Night of the Soul, his most famous work. So I'm not at the beginning of the journey, Rowan, and I have every idea who I am, and no manipulative scumbag like you, you're satanic filth. You've got no moral or spiritual authority whatsoever. You talk nothing but shit, and nobody is going to persuade me off the path I'm on with this kind of crap. It's just total and utter crap. You're just making it up to try and manipulate the outcome that you want. Anyway, I'm going to make another comment in a minute.
Self-discovery in the life of the desert is the discovery of who you actually are. The burden that lays on you can be quite considerable, because to discover before God who you really are is less cosy than it might sound. We live in a world where self-discovery and self-expression sound wonderful. If only everybody else would go away, if only everybody else would stop telling me what to do, then I'd be so marvellous. Then my self would flower wonderfully in all its creativity and beauty and complexity. Yes, say the Desert Fathers. But the trouble is that if everybody else were taken away, you wouldn't have a clue who you were. And finding out who you were in the eyes of God would actually be a long and painful job. Again and again in the literature of the desert, you come up against that fundamental principle, self-criticism, which says to you, I haven't yet found who I am. I can't express myself because I don't know who I am yet. And what I want to express, and what feels like honesty and rampant integrity, and deep creativity is actually very, very likely to be just another manifestation of all those rather trivial, rather self-seeking motivations which I'd like to think I've left behind. Very briefly put, it's letting go of self-justification. That particular kind of creating one's own image and one's own selfhood that will justify oneself, that will enable oneself to say, well, I've made it now, I can relax. Only the mystery of God is going to tell me who I am. And that facing that mystery in its fullness is going to require of me an enormous dispossession of the things that look as if they're going to tell me who I am. John the Dwarf, Abba John said, "We have put the light burden on one side, that is to say, self-accusation, and we have loaded ourselves with a heavy burden, self-justification." Self-justification is, in fact, something inimical to the true self. Self-accusation, that is self-questioning, self-criticism, is the lighter burden, strange as it may sound. Self-expression, self-discovery, self-realization, since we have no idea at the beginning what that self is, this becomes a journey in the dark, a journey of labor, pain, and patience.
So you go on to say, Abba Isidore, the priest, writes about the danger of being guided by our hearts. Now that sounds rather strange. It's the wisdom of the saints, said Abba Isidore, to recognise the will of God. And it is in obeying the truth, and you emphasise that a human being surpasses everything else by being the image and likeness of God. So, while I'm not following my heart, I decided to follow the teaching and example of Christ. I wanted to be a Christian, and that's what I decided as a young person, and that's the path I've been on, despite the enormous amount that it's cost me and all the suffering it's brought me, and I'm not deviating from that path. I know what the teaching of Christ is, and it's that people like you are wolves in sheep's clothing. In fact, you're not even in sheep's clothing, you're a wolf in wolf's clothing. It's quite obvious that the things that you say are actually satanic. They're the opposite of Christian teaching. And even if you say anything that coincides with the truth, that's still to manipulate people. Your whole agenda is just to get what you want from other people. And like I've said before, you think that your speech has creative power, that you only have to say that something's true and it automatically becomes true. So I don't recognise the things that you say as truth. I know that they're lies. You lie about absolutely everything. You've lied about me. You lie about what Christian teaching is, and you lie about world events in a way that's caused the deaths of at least 1 million people. So just don't bother talking about the truth. You're never going to convince me with that shit. So just don't bother. But of all evil suggestions, the most terrible is that of following one's own heart. Well, this is all about me going to the Catholic Church again and not wanting to have sex with you and your perverted friends and deciding my own path in life. So I decided to follow Christ, and I'm following the teaching of Christ. And even if my heart said something else, which it doesn't, it's the teaching and example of Christ that has the authority. And some Illuminati shill who's talking nothing but shit doesn't have any authority. You've got no moral or spiritual authority whatsoever. And in any case, I'm a Catholic now, so if I wanted some spiritual guidance, I'd ask a Catholic. So I just don't want this kind of crap, which I know is crap and is leading everybody off in the wrong direction. How we would love to be able to say, following our own heart, following our truth, following our dream is what it's all about. Because following one's own heart without the critical edge of the truth, in which alone we become the image and likeness of God, is a path to disaster. It must be God who tells me who I am, not the hidden agenda of my ego and or yours. Well, you emphasise this hidden agenda. I haven't got a hidden agenda. My agenda's very out in the open, and I've told you it about 1,000 times now. And it must be God who tells me who I am. The trouble with that is, Rowan, you think that you are God, and we've got, as I've said before, Christianity is a revealed religion. Christian teaching is revealed in scripture, it's revealed in tradition, it's revealed in salvation history, and you can't just make up any old thing and say that that's Christian. So if you're pretending that you're a Christian, well, if you're actually a Christian, then you need to be having a frame of reference which is related to what Christian teaching actually is, whereas you just make up whatever crap suits you in the moment. So, from a Christian point of view, God who tells you who you are, well, I've told you about the way that you break the commandments, slandering people, committing adultery, there's people dead because of you. You worship false idols, you try and lead other people off down false paths, and you contradict the teaching of Jesus over and over again. And really, what could be more authoritative than the teaching of Jesus to a Christian? And you repeatedly contradict all of that. And don't be bothering telling me this is from God, because I know it isn't. It's you making it up. You're a cult leader and you think that you're God, and you're determined to convince everyone else that you're God as well. So anyway, you go on to say a bit later on, in human relations, we become locked more and more tightly into a sort of vast collusion, a collective fantasy about the truth. We long for someone else to confirm what we are, to support our needs, the agenda of our ego. Well, that's what you long for, Rowan. I don't need any of those things, so don't bother implying that it's me. I don't need you to confirm anything about me. Everything you think and say is completely irrelevant, because I know you're a lunatic and a Luciferian, and I don't trust you. You haven't got a decent bone in your body. You're absolutely rotten to the core. So then you say, in the world of the desert, stepping back from all of that is the necessary path to truth. And sometimes in the desert world, the desert fathers often speak of that weeping for our failure to be open, which you emphasised, to the God who will tell us who we are, our failure to become who God wants us to be, who God sees us as being. You're not talking about God, you're talking about you. And you're talking about your perverted astrophysical clergy friend. You've always on about this being open and stuff like that. Well, you can dream on, boy. I'm more inclined to put my steel toe caps on and kick you in the balls. So don't even bother with this shit about God. It's not God, it's you and your extreme narcissism and your determination to terrorise and manipulate everybody into giving you the outcome that you want. Anyway, I've got another comment to make about this video, so I'll make that in a minute.
But Isidore the priest writes about the danger of being guided by our hearts. Now that sounds rather strange. It's the wisdom of the saints, said Abbot Isidore, to recognize the will of God. And it is in obeying the truth that a human being surpasses everything else, being the image and likeness of God. But of all evil suggestions, the most terrible is that of following one's own heart. How we would love to be able to say, following our own heart, following our truth, following our dream is what it's all about. Because following one's own heart without the critical edge of the truth, in which alone we become the image and likeness of God, is a path to disaster. It must be God who tells me who I am, not the hidden agenda of my ego or yours. I would like to tell myself who I am, I would like to tell you who you are, and sometimes I would like you to tell me who I am. So in human relations we become locked more and more tightly into a sort of vast collusion, a collective fantasy about the truth. We long for someone else to confirm what we are, to support our needs, the agenda of our ego. In the world of the desert, stepping back from all that is the necessary path to truth. And sometimes in the desert world, the desert fathers often speak of that weeping for our failure to be open to the God who will tell us who we are, our failure to become who God wants us to be, who God sees us as being.
So you go on to say, if you think about people whose moral and spiritual integrity has mattered to you, if you think about what their lives are like, you may well recognise what's going on here. These are people who maybe don't need to choose very much because they've become habituated to seeing and responding in certain ways. We very often, struggling down in the foothills, need the discipline of choosing. Well, first of all, I'm not struggling down in the foothills, and neither are you. I mean, if you're talking about the foothills of spiritual life and the journey towards God for a Christian, following Christ, then not only are you not in the foothills, you're not even on the same continent. And you've no chance of getting to the foothills because you're going in the wrong direction. And I'm not in the foothills, as it happens. I'm at the summit of Mount Carmel. So I don't really need a Luciferian, lying, conniving scumbag to be talking this shit to me and telling me who I am, who I have to be, what I have to do, what God wants, because I know you lie about absolutely everything, so you're just wasting your time. Just don't bother. Honestly, I just can't believe that you just keep coming out with this shit. It's hardly believable. We very often, struggling down in the foothills, need the disciplines of choosing, need to be very self-aware about what's going on. But perhaps when spiritual maturity arrives, there isn't very much choice. And that's not a diminution, but an expansion of the personal. Because here is someone who, by a long and hard route, has become someone whose seeing and responding is instinctively truthful. You don't have to think about it. You have become habituated to seeing and responding truthfully. Well, I have become habituated to seeing and responding truthfully. But this goes on to become a bit more alarming in a minute. But you want to be the one who's defining truth, don't you? We don't look at reality and our experience and science and religious doctrine or anything like that. We don't look at that to determine truth. We have to rely on you to interpret truth for us, don't we? And to tell us what it is. The person is something more than the ego. That integral. Now, you mispronounce this word. You mean integral. It's quite a common mispronunciation of this word. You say integral. The person is something more than the ego. That integral responds to truth, which is something deeper than satisfying a system of wants. Well, I'm not trying to satisfy a system of wants. The only thing I want is for everyone to leave me alone and stop harassing me to death. So I'm not trying to do that. And the other point I would like to make in relation to you mispronouncing this word, integral, you do claim to be something of a linguist, and at one count it was supposed to be 12 languages that you spoke. You're claiming at least 7 languages, of which you claim that Spanish is one, but in fact it isn't, because I can tell easily that you don't speak Spanish. And I personally don't really believe you speak any other language with any great degree of competence, not the way that it's presented that you do anyway. So it's quite odd that you're supposed to be this phenomenal linguist and you can't even pronounce words properly in your own native language. And also, you put it on this super posh voice in these videos. Not only do you mispronounce this word here, which someone who'd come from the background that you're pretending you come from with this accent to try and make yourself sound very authoritative, not only would they not mispronounce the word like that, but they wouldn't use bad grammar the way that you do as well. You frequently end sentences with prepositions, which I do as well, but it's not me who's pretending I went to Eton, is it? So the fact that you're putting on this voice, you mispronounce words in your native language, and you're claiming to be a great linguist, and also your English grammar is actually very bad. I know what bad grammar and good grammar are because when I'm writing papers or theses or things like that, I do know the right grammar to use. I didn't grow up speaking that way, so it's harder to do when I'm talking. But it's not me who's trying to pretend I'm someone I'm not, and that I'm somehow more elite and sophisticated, which is really the impression that you're giving. I do understand people changing the way they speak when they're public speaking, because I do. I don't speak the way I would just talk with my friends. Like when I'm making this video, I would be a lot more laid back talking with my friends, and I also speak a dialect as well when I'm talking with people from my hometown. So I do understand changing the way you speak for different situations, but you've gone a bit over the top with it, really, and I think that's a bit strange. And you're trying to sound authoritative. That's why you've put on this super posh accent, even though it's quite incongruent with you mispronouncing words and using bad grammar. The sort of unspoken theme that I have in mind is how all of this sense of the authentically human, depends and can only depend on the quality of our silence, the need to let go of words in certain ways. And that just sounds like more mumbo jumbo to me. I can't even be bothered to comment on that. That willingness to occupy a space before God, which is not a defended territory, defended against God or against anyone else. And because we occupy a space that isn't a defended territory, it's space both for God and for each other. Oh, how cosy. Well, I don't defend myself against God. God helps me. I don't need to defend myself against God. I do need to defend myself against scumbags, though, and you're a scumbag. And I need to defend myself against people who are trying to force things on me as well. Because people will just escalate the situation until they get the reaction that they want with people like you and people who are determined to harass me to death. That's what they've done. If I didn't react to them, they just escalated and escalated it until they caused me great distress, and it just went on and on like that. It was deliberate. They were deliberately trying to break me down and discredit me. And so you're emphasising space here as well. I'm not supposed to defend myself against astrophysicists, dirty old men. I can't even remember how old he is, let me think. He's over 30 years older than me, and I met him when I was 31. So I'm not supposed to try and defend myself against perverted clergy who are over 30 years older than me, are trying to force themselves on me and have a personality disorder. He's tied to his mother's apron strings as well. He's a mummy's boy. And all that's going to bring me closer to God as well, on top of all of that. We are moving beyond our fascination, our hypnosis by the ideas of choice and individuality as conceived in the modern world, you say. So this is something that's quite a common theme in Anglicanism, actually, that I came across, that people in the past thought in a more collective way and people today think in a more individual way. Well, there is some truth in that, but the kind of collective understanding that people had in the past was more that people were born into a certain role in life, and this was determined already, and they tended to just stay within their own social class and in the professions of their ancestors and stuff like that. And this was just how society was. And society did become more individualistic towards the end of the Middle Ages. But the kind of collectivism that you're talking about, where other people define you and tell you what the truth is, that's not the kind of the same as the more collective understanding that people had previously. So you always want to promote collectivism anyway, but collectivism wasn't communism before. We are moving beyond our fascination, our hypnosis by the ideas of choice and individuality as conceived in the modern world, moving towards a possibility of a human life characterised by consistent, instinctive responsiveness to the truth. Well, you're talking in your hypnotic way in this video and trying to sound authoritative, putting on false accents and so on. And you define yourself as God, really, and that what you say constitutes truth. It doesn't have to bear any relation to the actual truth. So I'm instinctively responding with the truth to all the shit that you talk, which you call truth when it suits you. Acquiring an instinctive taste for truth, a taste for truth, you repeat that. That's to say, an appetite for what is real, so strong that it allows us constantly to keep ourselves in question, under scrutiny, not in an obsessional way, just going on asking, who's been served here, the ego or the truth? Well, who I'm trying to serve is Christ, actually. And because of that, well, that's one reason why I know that nothing that you say is true, because it's the opposite of what Christ teaches and what Christian doctrine is. You teach the opposite, you're a Luciferian, and you're not convincing me that you're the sole mediator of truth, that you define truth. You're just trying to bring me under your control and control my reality. And you were absolutely beside yourself when I didn't capitulate when I was thrown out of my house. So this is why you were coming out with all this crap in the summer last year. So do remember, it's now the 9th of July today. It's the anniversary, the first anniversary of me being thrown out of my house. So you just think about that and see if you can figure out whether you got what you wanted out of it, and try and let that inform your decisions in the future. That's how normal people learn, you see. Anyway, I'm going to say something about my beloved in a minute.
If you think about people whose moral and spiritual integrity has mattered to you, if you think about what their lives are like, you may very well recognize what's going on here. These are people who, it may be, don't need to choose very much, because they've become habituated to seeing and responding in certain ways. We, very often, struggling down in the foothills need the disciplines of choosing, need to be very self-aware about what's going on. But perhaps when spiritual maturity arrives, there isn't very much choice. And that's not a diminution, but an expansion of the personal. Because here is someone who, by a long and hard route, has become someone whose seeing and responding is instinctively truthful. You don't have to think about it. You have become habituated to seeing and responding truthfully. The person is something more than the ego, that integral response to truth, which is something deeper than satisfying a system of wants. The sort of unspoken theme that I have in mind is how all of this sense of the authentically human, depends and can only depend on the quality of our silence, the need to let go of words in certain ways, that willingness to occupy a space before God which is not a defended territory, defended against God or against anyone else. And because we occupy a space that isn't a defended territory, it's space both for God and for each other. We are moving beyond our fascination, our hypnosis by the ideas of choice and individuality as conceived in the modern world, moving towards the possibility of a human life characterized by consistent, instinctive responsiveness to the truth, acquiring an instinctive taste for truth. A taste for truth, that's to say, an appetite for what is real, so strong that it allows us constantly to keep ourselves in question, under scrutiny, not in an obsessional way, just going on asking, who is being served here, the ego or the truth?
So I don't want you to forget about my new lover, so that's why I keep reminding you, because I know you'll be wishing as well, won't you? And you'll be looking forward to the photo that I'm going to have taken as soon as you're in prison, of us together with our arms around each other, in complete bliss because we're together at last. It's going to be so wonderful. I'm really looking forward to it because he's just such a wonderful man. And I'm so grateful to you for suggesting that I should seduce a priest, because I would have never found him otherwise. And he's just so fantastic. I can't even describe him. And he's just so handsome and sexy. And he's got the sexiest voice as well. I just love his Welsh accent. He's from North Wales, actually. He's a gog. Oh, and I had another good idea about what to do when you're in prison as well, because I'm already going to be suing you for everything, so you won't have a penny left. And even in the unlikely event of you having a penny left, the Crown will seize it because you're a terrorist. So I'm going to have all your money and property because I'm going to sue you for everything. And on top of that, I thought I might apply for your job at Cambridge University as well. You know, I think that would be a nice job for me. So you just think about that. When you're in prison, I'm going to be with my lover, who you suggested I get together with, that I seduce a priest. And of course, he's a real priest as well. He's not like you, completely null and utterly void. And he's a lot younger than you. And he's really gorgeous, and he's got the most wonderful personality. He's nothing like you at all. And we're going to be together, and I'm going to send you a photo. You'll be able to show it to your burly cellmate. Oh, and the other thing was, I thought of a few positive things for you when you're in prison. I mean, look on the bright side. This is the main thing, actually. Just think how much your carbon footprint will shrink once you're in prison, and you won't be owning all that property anymore, and you won't be able to fly off on long-haul flights everywhere. And also, you won't be able to talk as much shit either, so there won't be as much hot air in the atmosphere. So with your dedication to environmentalism, you'd be quite happy to be living a more restricted life, won't you? And this will reduce your carbon footprint. And because you're so delusional, you can pretend that you sent Paul in prison, can't you, as well? Because he was in prison. He was imprisoned by the Romans. So it's got many positive advantages. And also, I mean, I'm sure you'll get a really, really nice cellmate. They probably won't make you share with a serial killer or anything like that. You might even end up sharing with Tony Blair. Oh, mind you, he is a serial killer, isn't he? Anyway, don't worry about that. I'm sure it'll all be fine. And you'll have my photo of me with my lover to cheer me up. My nice priest from North Wales. So you make sure that you keep thinking about that, because I'm dreaming about him all the time. I can't think about anything else. He's just so wonderful. So I'll leave it there for now. But enjoy your weekend, and obviously I'll be turning up to arrest you. You never know the day nor the hour, so be alert. Hasta la próxima.
Niro's waiting, talking Italian. It's getting kind of late now. Oh, I wonder if you'll stay now.